amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello, listeners, and welcome. I'm delighted today to say my guest is Karni Liddell, who is a former Paralympian champion turned disability activist, journalist, podcaster, clinical social worker and mum. Karni holds a clinical master's in social work at QUT and a double bachelor's degree in communications from Bond University. She is a popular, internationally acclaimed keynote speaker. At 12 months old, Karni was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, a rare neuromuscular wasting disease. Her parents were told she would never walk and would not live past her teens. But here she is, many years later, ready to chat with me by telephone. Welcome, Karni.
Oh, thank you so much. I wish I could have you telling me all that every morning.
Oh, I'm happy to do that. Now, Karni, lovely to have you here, really lovely. But I believe you were misdiagnosed for 40 years and only recently you were diagnosed with congenital, how do you say, tinopathy, which is also a neuromuscular wasting disease. But how was that sort of misdiagnosed for so long?
It wasn't misdiagnosed as such, and it's congenital. I think it's titanopathy, but titan just means, which is what I'm learning, slowly but surely. It just is one of the biggest muscle genes in the body.
Right.
And at birth, I am 45, so in 1979, you can probably imagine there wasn't what we have today, which is MRIs and ultrasounds and blood. Obviously, when my mother was pregnant with me, she wasn't able to get the testing that we get done these days that I had done with my son, I guess, Kai, throughout the pregnancy. So Mum was quite aware that I wasn't moving in her, throughout the pregnancy, but I was her first pregnancy. So she told doctors a few times that I wasn't moving and kicking and all that sort of stuff, but of course they just sort of thought, oh, well, everything seems fine and everything's fine and go away sort of thing. And then obviously I came out and it was a pretty traumatic birth. I was breeched, born upside down, legs over the head.
Oh, right.
And looked very, I would say, in inverted commas, obviously disabled looking. Inverted thumbs, very strange looking feet. And from there, I was diagnosed, I think they diagnosed me around 12 months of age with spinal muscular atrophy,
right.
And then I guess throughout my life, I've always had what you would call a gait. I walk with a severe lordosis foot drop, and you wouldn't mistake me as a...
But you haven't let, can I just, you haven't let it stop you living a wonderfully full life, because even at 14, you broke a swimming world record, and you've now completed the 2 Paralympic Games, 1996 and 2000, where you won medals at both games and were the Australian swimming captain at the Sydney 2000 Olympics. Now, I mean, that's an incredible achievement for anyone, let alone somebody who does have a disability like you. But can you tell us a little bit more about that time, Karni?
Yeah, sure. I'm from Rockhampton originally, so the beef capital of Australia. I was Miss Beef Week 1996.
Oh, right.
And
yeah.
So it was a pretty good year, 1996. But yes, I was, at an able-bodied mainstream school in Rockhampton as the only disabled kid at the school. And then luckily for me, I stumbled across, or I guess my mother and father stumbled across a disabled sporting competition in Brisbane, which was run by Sporting Willies at the time. I was 8 years of age, kid that thought I was probably, very different. And I guess when you're at a school, when you're the only disabled kid at your school, you feel like you're the only kid with a disability in the world. And then all of a sudden I rolled into Chandler Pool at 8 years of age, and all of a sudden I was surrounded by people who looked like me. Everybody there had a disability, and it was just, it was magical, to be honest, that feeling of being in a majority and seeing other kids with disabilities that probably changed my life more than anything. Even the Paralympics changed my life in drastic ways.
I would imagine it would. So what was the world record you won at just 14?
Yeah, it was 50-metre freestyle. I broke the world record.
That's
in
incredible.
My classification. Yeah, which was F6. So that was, grade 9, grade 10, came back to Rock Vegas, and all of a sudden my life...
You were famous.
Yeah, in Rocky I was, yeah.
At school, anyway.
Yeah, and back then you got to remember too, people didn't know about the Paralympics. I didn't know about it, and people certainly didn't know anything about disabled sports. So when I went to my first Paralympics in '96, there wasn't any fanfare or media or commercialism.
There is now. Mm.
There was no crowds, except for obviously our own families and half a Rocky. But Sydney 2000. I don't think nobody could have predicted. Very similar to what happened here with Matildas, I say. Nobody could have predicted what was going to happen in 2000 with the Paralympics, and
it became huge, didn't it?
Yeah, we were in the tunnel, underneath Homebush, like we were in the tunnel in Atlanta, and when we wheeled out that day to that opening ceremony, I can tell you now, I don't think anyone was more shocked than us when we saw those crowds full. And from there, it was sold out. The entire Sydney 2000 Paralympic Games were sold out, and we had full crowds, and it changed. I mean, obviously, it changed my life because all of a sudden I had a profile. I was a swimming team captain, and Australia actually topped the medal tally back then. We haven't done it since, but maybe Brisbane 2032, we can become number one again. But yeah, Australia won and beat the whole world in Sydney.
That would be terrific. Yes, as you say, looking at Brisbane, and then you went on, Karni. I mean, apart from achieving all of that, then you were one of 18 Australians Paralympics photographed by Emma Hack for a nude calendar. All you wore were a pair of sunglasses and were covered in body paint to look like a polka-dotted bikini. Now, that would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, look, it's hard to put into words when you're a kid from Rocky and, you go along to all the high school dances and you don't feel pretty and you don't feel beautiful and you don't get asked to dance. There was nothing in me that ever thought that I was, obviously I had no aspirations to model. And when they asked me to do whatever, really, I guess when you are a person with a disability, and unfortunately in a lot of ways things haven't really changed much when it comes to employment of people with disabilities. Australia is actually one of the worst countries in the Western world when it comes to employment of people with disabilities. So back then when I was asked to do anything like a photo shoot or a photo or anything, of course I said yes. And I did not know what I was really signing myself up for, but it was a lot of fun.
It would have been terrific. Absolutely. And then in 2008, you were one of several Queenslanders to have your image painted by Ludmilla Clark to go on display at the Customs House in Rockhampton. Is it still there?
Yeah, look, all of that stuff that happened, it was interesting because back then, you can imagine, no social media. Nobody had ever seen disability like the way that we portrayed it. I was also I was in a bikini shoot in what they called Inside Sport. Remember Sports Illustrated magazines back then?
Yes.
And I was again asked to do a photo shoot. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I was doing a sports photo shoot, and then all of a sudden I was in a bikini, and all of a sudden I was...
And a fabulous photo, I might add. Looking gorgeous.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yep.
But the media reacted in a very big... I probably have never received so much media attention except for that shoot because nobody had ever seen disability, I guess, looking like a woman that looked beautiful and looked a certain way. And I think it was one of those times that it really it broke through that disability perception and stereotype that. Yeah, well, I thought it did. I mean, we're still fighting, obviously, but it was interesting. A journalist actually wrote an article about me when I did the Inside Sport and the body painting calendars and said that I was lying to the public because I didn't have my wheelchair in the photo.
Oh, you're joking.
And I thought, no, and look, that was great because you know what? It started a conversation around disability doesn't discriminate. It chooses beautiful, everyday, ambitious, smart, funny people every day, and we're not a minority group.
Exactly.
20% of Australians have a disability, and look, anyone listening today could end up with a disability tomorrow. So,
well, I couldn't agree more. My last guest, we were talking about aphasia, where her husband had a stroke out of the blue. But now, I mean, you haven't just taken it on board for yourself. You've taken it on for so many, many other people because over your throughout your career, you've raised over $1 million for various charities you support. Now, that must have taken a huge effort, Karni.
Yeah, look, the charity and the fundraising things that I've done along my way, I think, have been because even though I've got a profile, even though I've got a master's degree in social work, even though I'm a Paralympian, even though I look a certain way and have a lot of privilege, I struggle to get jobs and I struggle to get on planes in this country because I use a wheelchair. And there's a lot of fights that are happening still in our community that I think the public, if they knew about it, and that's why I keep on shouting and talking and trying, because if it's happening to someone like me,
Yes.
if I'm struggling, if I'm getting kicked off flights because I use a wheelchair or I'm considered too risky to get a job, then I can only imagine what's happening to my brothers and sisters with disabilities who don't have the same privilege
Exactly.
that I have.
And don't have the same voice. I mean, what did happen there? I mean, I know that you got kicked off the plane because of your wheelchair. Did you end up getting an apology or anything? Because that was pretty horrendous, really.
We're all kicked off planes nearly every other week. I still am. This is not a rare occasion. We've got a real big, huge issue within the airline industry, mostly Qantas and Jetstar.
Right, which doesn't give us much option outside of that in Australia anyway. Oh, we've got Virgin, I suppose, yes.
Yeah, Virgin's great. I mean, they broke my wheelchair just recently, but they paid for it. But the Royal Commission into Disability Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation, which are three pretty big words, as you know. We actually, myself and a doctor called Dr. Dinesh Palashay, I think his last name is. He's quite incredible. He's in a wheelchair. He's a doctor. He's a lawyer. He's now a pilot. We actually held 2 hearings for the Royal Commission into Airlines, which was a pretty big risk. Obviously, we didn't know if we'd get any submissions, and obviously most people through the Royal Commission were providers. But actually, those submissions for that particular hearing into airlines, we had the most number of submissions in Australia by disabled people into airlines. So that just gives you a little indication about how we are treated in Australia by airlines. That the Royal Commission into Disability Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation had the most amount of submissions for our airlines. And we get kicked off planes for a variety of reasons. When I say kicked off, I mean...
What do they literally ask you to get off?
Well, I'll give you one example. I'll give you 10. Like Kurt Fearnley's been kicked off planes, Dylan Alcott's been kicked off planes, friends of mine have arrived without their wheelchairs. There's a million stories I could tell you, but just to give you a little indication of what can go wrong is that we can get on a plane. For example, I can get on a plane with Qantas with my dangerous goods certificate, which they give to us each year. We have to apply for our wheelchairs that I've been using the same wheelchair for 15 years. And they're not dangerous goods at all. The batteries aren't above the kilowatts, but we do that through Qantas. We get our dangerous goods certificate. They issue it for the year. We then obviously go through the hell of it. We supply it every time we fly. We do all the right things. And then I got onto a plane to go to Sydney, a full flight to Melbourne, and went through at least, I'd say 45 minutes of fighting along the way from the front of the counter right through to getting on the plane. Wheelchairs on the plane, and then the full flight of people was held up for another 45 minutes while they decided whether my wheelchair was, in fact, a dangerous goods, even though...
Because of the battery, Karni?
Been the ones that issued the dangerous goods certificate, and I'd flown at least 50 times before.
But was it because... Sorry, was it because of the battery?
Yeah, the batteries, yeah.
Right, yep.
They're not actually dangerous goods, but anyway.
Yeah.
So they gave me a dangerous goods certificate. They come on a plane from Germany. That's how they arrive.
Right.
And from there, a baggage handler decided he didn't believe it, and I was pulled off the plane. And the whole plane didn't know what was going on, and they had to get my wheelchair off the plane, and I missed a speech and lost $5,000 in a speech and left 180 people waiting for me in Sydney to do an International Women's Day speech.
Oh, and no compensation or whatever. And as you say, it's the the stress and whatever of it all happening at and with other people, inconvenience other people as well as yourself. But you've also had your car stolen with your wheelchair in it, and your electric trike.
You're making me sound like I've had a good run.
No, that's all right. We're getting on to the positive things in a minute.
Stuff. That's right. Now, look, the wheelchair, yes, like most people right now in Australia, lots of people are losing their vehicles. There's a pretty big epidemic going on. I've been told there's 70 cars on average being stolen a day in Brisbane. at the moment.
Look, it's shocking. Everywhere, I think, but particularly on the Gold Coast and in Brisbane, it really is, yes.
Yeah, my car was stolen. Yeah, you're right. It's a wheelchair car, so I had a hoist in the back to lift my 30-kilo electric wheelchair up and down. Yes, and that was stolen with my wheelchair in the back from a underground secure car park, and ridden off by two 16-year-old kids.
Now, you're listening to Lots to Chat About. I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is former Paralympian and disability advocate Karni Liddell. You are the ambassador for Kids Helpline, Muscular Dystrophy, and Sporting Wheelies and Disabled Association, and you were the patron of the International Day of People with a Disability, and were awarded the Pride of Australia Medal, and you were awarded the Bond University Alumni Community Achievement. So you're not idle, you do a lot.
I do a lot, and I think sometimes when you see bios of my other friends with disabilities, we often do have a lot of titles beside our name. To be really honest, that's probably because we actually can't get really good, meaningful, long-term, full-time work. And
yes.
I don't think any of us want to be activists. To be honest, I'd love to not be an activist tomorrow. That means that we're equal. That means that I'm equal. And until we are, then people like me will continue to fight because we actually have to. I don't have a choice. I have to fight for myself, and I've got to fight for my kids. I've got a 7-year-old little boy that's also in my world.
Oh, look, he looks gorgeous. I must admit, I've looked at your Instagram and Facebook, and he's an absolute delight. And you love animals as well. You've got dogs, and
that's right. Yeah, look, we are. I'm very blessed to have a son. He's 7 years of age and keeping me on my toes, that's for sure. But the word activist and advocate, a lot of us talk about it, and we all say the same thing, that it's very, very tiring. It's very draining, and it's about. I think we're nearly at the time now, hopefully in Australia, that we can start listening not just to disabled people, but we need to be leading organisations. We need to be sitting on disability boards. We need to be CEOs of disability service providers. We need to be the CEO of NDIS. We need to be disability ministers, because at the moment we've just got a lot of able-bodied people talking on our behalf all the time.
That have no idea what it's like to live as a disabled person. You're quite right.
And also not just that they don't know what it's like. It's also because, like I said before, Australia ranks 21st out of 29 OECD First Nations. So we're 21st out of 29 Western countries when it comes to employment of people with a disability. And I've been talking about this for 25 years, and it hasn't shifted. Even with the NDIS, which was obviously brought in to hopefully enable people like myself and other people with disabilities to have the right supports and services to be able to get out the front door of their accessible units and come out to the community, and then we get work, we get employment, because then we can pay tax. That was the primary objective of the NDIS. And if disability organisations and providers and Paralympic and disabled sporting organisations, if they don't employ us, then no one's going to employ us. Until that happens, we will never, ever, ever be able to ask the big companies like the BHPs and the Virgins, and if government organisations aren't employing us, we really need able-bodied people to fight with us and alongside us, because we're really tired of fighting, because you come across as whinging and annoying and loud and high maintenance, and all we want to do is just what you want to do. I have to work because I've got to pay for a mortgage and shoes and food and school fees. Like, I'm a human being. I can't rely on funding. I don't have funding.
And you don't want to rely on funding. You'd like to, It's like anybody sort of making yourself feel good is getting out there, and you are prepared to do that. Why do you think Australia is so bad at that?
Oh, how long have you got?
Yeah, I know. It does seem
Australia-
extraordinary because I must admit I come from Ireland, as my listeners know, and have just been spending quite a bit of time over there recently, and I think they are much further ahead than we are here in Australia
they
and
are.
other
They
countries.
are.
Yeah.
Look, I know for a fact, because I'm on stage a lot and obviously I'm interacting with both disability community and the corporate world. I think what it is Australia has absolutely no idea. So when I tell that stat, for example, people are really shocked and embarrassed. They're like, oh my goodness. And then when they go to do it, they don't really know how to connect with us, if that makes sense, because...
They look the other way.
Well, I think what's happened is one of the major reasons why, we get kicked off Qantas flights or we have trouble, I don't know, going to Dreamworld or whatever it is because there's this misconception that I'm the riskiest person in the room to support, employ or serve.
Right.
And that's not actually true. You don't have to have all the bells and whistles and the ramps and lifts and hoists to employ me. All you've got to do is nod your head.
Yep.
And look at my resume and employ me as a social worker or whatever it is that I've got the qualification for. Because
Exactly.
able-bodied people, you've employed plenty of them and a lot of them have been high maintenance and hard work. And it doesn't mean that you put that every single able-bodied person is going to be like that person that was hard work or high maintenance or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of our biggest barriers. And also it's reflective in the fact that even our Paralympic team at the moment, we loved watching the Paralympics. We had great ratings. We got big superstar names like Dylan Alcott and Kurt Fernley and Alex O'Leary.
Household names, certainly, yes.
Well, and absolutely. And Australia actually ranked 9th on the medal tally, which means we actually had the worst performing Australian Paralympic team in our history. Now, I don't say that to say anything negative about our team.
Yeah.
I say that because what's happening in our disability community is reflected in the Paralympic team. If the Paralympians are struggling and they're struggling to get employment,
Yes.
and they're eating poorly and they're unable to find accessible accommodation, then of course they're coming ninth. And of course our Australian women's wheelchair basketball team didn't qualify. So I guess the reason I brought it up is because people listen to Paralympics. People listen to Paralympians. And I don't want people to think that, I'm saying, I sound like a bitter old has-been saying that they came ninth. Absolutely not. I'm saying it because Australia, we desperately need you to look at it, acknowledge it, and think, okay, if we're coming ninth in the world, we were number one in Sydney.
Yes.
We have literally gotten worse every single Paralympic game since. And ever since Sydney, we've become more commercial. There's been more funding. The Paralympians are now funded equally. Yes. They are getting money for medals. This is awesome. What's the missing link here? Why are they not competing well?
It does seem extraordinary. It can't just be that the other countries have, got so much better, although it could be that they've got extra funding and extra help.
Not at all. Sorry, I wish it was. It's not that. It really is a matter of the Australian women's wheelchair basketball team didn't qualify, the bocce team didn't qualify, male and female, and the blind soccer team didn't qualify. So we had 4 huge Australian teams not there. So if we're not there, we can't medal. And we didn't have, in the swimming team, for example, we only had 3 swimmers in the classifications between S1 to S7.
Right.
So that's 7 classifications, male and female, for every event with nobody in them. So in other words, severely disabled athletes, we're missing them.
Yes.
Like people like me, they're no longer on the Paralympic team. So we are desperately in need of anyone out there listening. If you're a kid or a teenager, even an adult with a severe or any type of physical disability and you'd like to get into sport, disabled sport, we are doing the biggest search ever in Australia right now to find you and support you because we desperately need you, and we are hoping to change that 9th in LA, and we desperately need to change it in Brisbane 2032.
Well, that's
So
wonderful for our
this is our
listeners out
chance.
there, because many of them do have sight impairment and other disabilities. So, yes, that's
goalball and
terrific to
blind
know.
soccer. Yeah, well, goalball and blind soccer, we didn't even have the teams qualify. So now, if you have a vision impairment, I cannot beg you. Please ring Sporting Wheelies, Spinal Life, Vision Australia, Paralympics Australia, Queensland Academy of Sport. Ring, 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 ring.
Oh, that's terrific. I mean, one of your sayings really is to encourage people to have a crack at life no matter what their life circumstances are. And, you certainly have, because you are an internationally acclaimed keynote speaker, and you do have a voice, Karni, which is terrific. But do you enjoy that? You must, I would imagine, listening to you now, chatting to me. I would imagine that's why you have become internationally acclaimed as a public speaker.
I do. I absolutely love training and I love speaking, and that's my happy place for sure. Especially training. I really love training people on how to support people with disabilities better, that inclusive employment, recruitment, and also making disability less complicated and less scary. Because I guess once you've employed a person with a disability once, you realise how easy it is, and that there are so many supports out there for corporations to do it, like Job Access, for example. Job Access has been around a long time. It's a federally funded initiative that any employer can ring right now and get advice from for free. But when it comes to speaking, I just want all those 8-year-old kids out there to know that I want them to have the same life that I had. If I hadn't gone to that competition in Brisbane, I wouldn't be here today. It's as simple as that. I wouldn't be healthy. I wouldn't be independent. I wouldn't have met other disabled people and learned how to be disabled. And I wouldn't have the friendship circles I had through the Paralympics. And I certainly wouldn't have felt as confident as I did at school if I wasn't a swimmer. That was my label. I became a swimmer, and that was the label that everyone knew me as, instead of being the disabled kid. So,
being the brilliant swimmer, you do keep yourself very, very fit. I've noticed that on your social media. Are you? You're still swimming, but you also do lots of other physical exercise as well, Karni.
Yeah, I try to keep active. I've got a 7-year-old kid to keep up with, so I ride a power assist truck.
Yes.
And I love to paddle. I sit down, paddle, and outrig, and I get in the water whenever I can. I can't swim as much as I used to because of my shoulders that have decided after 45 years of pushing wheelchairs and swimming, they don't really love swimming anymore, but I try to keep active, yes, because I love it. It's good for your mental health as well.
Well, it is, and certainly you have put that all into action. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but it's been absolutely wonderful to chat to you, and I would love to have you on again at some stage. And
no worries.
Just going quickly back to that search for young children that may have a disability. I know you've got an Instagram account and you've got Facebook, but where else would they go, Karni, to start that sort of thing on the roll, really?
Yeah, absolutely. At the moment, there's a lot of Paralympic talent identification days coming up.
Yes.
And I can share that with you. And then also Paralympics Australia, obviously they're the governing body, but pretty much whatever sport I'm talking about. So, for example, if I'm talking about bocce,
yep.
If you're a quadriplegic and you'd like to play bocce, then you'd look up Bocce Queensland or Bocce Australia. If you want to find out more about, so for example, if you want to find out about swimming, and they call it para-sport swimming now, you'd either go to Swimming Australia and ask. All the sports now own both disabled sport and able-bodied sport. But if you're really stuck, just ring Sporting Wheelies, Spinal Life, or if you've got a vision impairment, ring Vision Australia.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, just ring around until you find the right person.
Or they can contact me here, and anybody, I can hopefully put them in touch with you.
And those dates are coming up, so I can send you the link.
Terrific.
To the dates.
That would be wonderful. Absolutely. So thank you, Karni Liddell, former Paralympian, disability activist, TV presenter, which we didn't really get onto, but next time, and internationally acclaimed keynote speaker, for being my guest today. And as I said, Karni is on both Instagram and Facebook as Karni Liddell. But thank you, Karni, so much, and thank you, Paul, for producing.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.